You know the words by heart. We all do. Hand on your heart, facing the flag. But what if I told you that for 50 years, the way Americans saluted that flag involved a gesture that would be totally unthinkable today? The story of the Pledge of Allegiance, well, it's not what you think. And it's packed with secrets we're about to dig into.
Take a look at this. For half a century, this was a normal day in an American classroom. Millions of kids saluting the flag with a stiff, outstretched arm. It just looks wrong, doesn't it? Almost alien. And the story of why this gesture completely vanished is one of the most fascinating and forgotten chapters in American history.
And you know what? The salute wasn't the only thing that changed. The words themselves have been a moving target. The original pledge from 1892 is pretty different from the one we say today. For one, the personal "my flag" was switched out. And those two very famous words, "under God," yeah, they hadn't even been dreamed up yet. To really get how this all happened, we have to go way back to the beginning. And the origin story is this wild mix of things you'd never expect. A minister with some very progressive politics, a huge national party, and a really, really clever marketing campaign. So meet the guy behind it all, Francis Bellamy. He was a Baptist minister, sure, but he was also a Christian socialist. He believed that the best way to unite a country that was changing fast, especially with so many new immigrants, was through a patriotic public education system. For him, the pledge wasn't just a nice poem, it was a tool for a mission. Bellamy didn't just write the pledge on a whim. He wrote it for a massive event, the countrywide celebration for the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's voyage. It got published in a super popular family magazine called The Youth's Companion, and it was the main event for a school celebration program they were rolling out nationwide. But here's the kicker. This wasn't all just about patriotism. It was also about business. The Youth's Companion didn't just print the pledge. They used it to launch a massive campaign to sell American flags to schools. And man, did it work. They sold a ton of them, and that campaign is how a flag and this new pledge ended up in thousands and thousands of classrooms. Okay, so that brings us back to the salute itself, what became known as the Bellamy salute. It was a huge part of the original ceremony, but today it's like it's been totally scrubbed from our collective memory. The original instructions in the magazine were super specific. Kids would start out with a kind of military-style salute, but then, right when they said the words, "to my flag," they were told to extend their right hand out gracefully, palm up, and point it toward the flag. Which, of course, raises this huge question. Why would a tradition that was practiced every single day for half a century just go away? What on earth could happen to make this gesture so toxic that it had to be completely erased? Well, the answer comes from a really dark chapter in world history. Decades after the Bellamy salute was invented, political parties over in Europe, we're talking the fascists in Italy and, of course, the Nazis in Germany, adopted salutes that, to anyone watching, looked disturbingly similar. And you gotta understand that the similarity was a complete and total coincidence. But the timing couldn't have been worse. As America was getting ready to fight fascism in Europe, having pictures of its own kids making a gesture that looked chillingly like a Nazi salute was, well, it was a public relations nightmare. The resemblance, no matter how innocent, just couldn't stand. But it wasn't just the gesture that got a rewrite because of world events. The very words we say have been tweaked and changed again and again, all because of the pressures of war and politics. You can actually track the pledge's evolution on a pretty clear timeline. There are major changes at these key moments in American history, 1923, 1942, and then finally 1954. And each change tells you a little something about what the country was worried about at the time. So the first big word change happens in 1923. Right after World War I, groups like the American Legion started getting nervous. They worried that new immigrants, when they said, "my flag," might secretly be thinking of the flag of their old country. So they pushed to make it super clear, leaving zero room for interpretation. All right, fast forward to 1942. The U.S. is now deep in World War II, and that salute controversy has hit a boiling point. Veterans groups were pushing hard, and Congress finally acted. They officially changed the U.S. flag code, tossed out the Bellamy salute, and made the hand over the heart gesture the new law of the land. But the story is not over yet. The final, and you could argue the most controversial change came about a decade later. And this one was driven by a whole new global conflict, the Cold War. The big push for this change came from religious and civic groups, and the Knights of Columbus were really leading the charge. They started adding "Under God" to their own recitations back in '51, and then launched a major campaign to get Congress to make it official for everyone. And the political reason for this was crystal clear. Adding "Under God" was a way to draw a thick, bold line in the sand between the United States and its biggest rival, the Soviet Union, which was officially atheist. It was basically a statement of faith being used as a tool of foreign policy, a way to shout about the difference between the two superpowers. Then, on Flag Day in 1954, President Eisenhower made it official. He signed the bill, saying the new words would help reaffirm the transcendence of religious faith in America's heritage and future. And with that signature, the Pledge of Allegiance as we know it today was finally complete. But even as the words were being locked in, a totally different battle was heating up. And it was a big one. Could you actually be forced to say the pledge at all? This question was so important it went all the way to the Supreme Court. The challenge came from Jehovah's Witnesses. Their argument was that saluting a flag is a form of worship, an act of idolatry, which their faith strictly forbids. To them, pledging allegiance to a flag was no different than bowing down to a statue. What happened next in the courts was just, wow. It was incredibly dramatic. In 1940, the Supreme Court ruled against the students. They said national unity was more important than religious freedom. That decision led to a horrifying wave of violence against Jehovah's Witnesses across the country. But then, in a shocking move just 3 years later, the court did something it almost never does. It admitted it was wrong, and it completely reversed itself. That 1943 case, West Virginia versus Barnett, changed everything. And in one of the most famous opinions ever written, Justice Robert Jackson laid down these incredible words for the majority. He basically established this core principle of American freedom. No government official can force you to declare a belief. He argued that real patriotism has to be voluntary. It can't be forced. So when you step back and look at the whole story, the Pledge of Allegiance isn't some timeless piece of scripture. It's more like a mirror. It reflects America's biggest hopes and deepest fears in every era. From the push for unity after the Civil War, to the fight against fascism, to the Cold War. It's been shaped by socialists, by marketers, by veterans, and by judges. It's a living document of our past. And the only question left is, what will it reflect about our future?